starting in your neck of the woods, you are in Houston. How on fire is that city behind this quarterback, CJ Stroud, who has gone from the last time we talked, I believe, about CJ Stroud, we were comparing him to his classmates in the 2023 draft. Then the is he top 10 right now conversation took off. Now today, there's MVP talk about the second overall pick halfway through his first season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the fan base here, after the entire Deshaun Watson saga, I don't think they felt like they had any hope how often does a good quarterback come along for any particular franchise? You don't replace one good quarterback with another and another. And yet Stroud has been everything he was billed to be by the organization and more. And it was interesting because going through the preseason, he didn't look great. I mean, there was a question coming into the season, like, is Stroud going to start or is it going to be Davis Mills? People forget that it was a rough preseason for him. And a lot of the talk was, and I, people in the organization where I'm like, is this a clean pocket issue? Like, does he have to have a clean pocket to play well in the NFL? And no, it's been quite the opposite. He's dealt with offensive line issues. He has not always had a clean pocket, and yet has just been absolutely stellar. To me, what ended up being the most truthful about him was the stats, the tools that he showcased, but really the Georgia game and then how he worked out going into the draft. And we got all caught up on the S2 scores. Oh, the S2, like he's, and he said, "What? I'm a football player, not a test taker." Yeah. Like that turned out to be completely true. So people here are elated. I mean, between Stroud and DeMeco Ryans, it's like a night and day difference when you talk about what the organization looked like and how it was being absorbed by fans when it was going through the muck of the Deshaun Watson situation, all the fire, the coach firings and all this. It's the polar opposite of where that was.
So I'll tell you what I did not have on my bingo card for the 2023 season is week 11, looking forward to Texans Cardinals. Yeah. I'm interested in that, and I'm interested in that game, and not just because the Cardinals own the Texans 2024 first, which is looking worse and worse thanks to DeMeco Ryan, CJ Stroud and company. But they own that pick because that's what the Texans used to draft Will Anderson. So I want to kind of focus on those two organizations, specifically Stroud to start. I wonder, because a lot of people give credit, sort of, retroactively, they give thanks to Lovie Smith and Davis Mills for costing the Texans the number one overall pick. They would probably say, you'd never get anybody to say anything other than CJ Stroud was the top quarterback on their board. But a lot of people frame it as though, thanks to the Texans winning their last game of last season, the Texans ended up with number 2 and took the quarterback that the Panthers passed on. We'll get to the Panthers in a moment. My question to you is, as much as you know about that Texans organization, would they have taken Stroud if they'd ended up with the number 1 pick?
I actually don't think so. And I got to be careful what I talk about here, but there were things that they were doing prior to the draft that suggested to me they wanted to be sure that Stroud was the quarterback there at number 2. And I mean, I would put it to you this way. I don't think people in the organization were, especially when the S2 stuff came out, right, about Stroud, and which I think began this idea of like maybe he slips in the draft. The Texans, I don't think the Texans were out there beating it back as hard as they could have behind closed doors in terms of like when people would ask about this S2 stuff. If you really want Stroud to be there at 2, and you don't want the Panthers to take him at 1, what do? You just go, I don't know. That's S2 stuff. That's interesting. You don't, but I guess I don't want to say they wanted Stroud to fall, but they wanted Stroud to fall. That's how it felt. It felt after the pick like it was a team that was hoping he was going to end up being there at number 2. Now, will we ever know the full story? No, we won't, because as you said, I mean, in retrospect, everybody can say they liked Stroud better when all the indications we heard were absolutely like Bryce Young's the guy. And by the way, Bryce Young may still be fine. But yeah, I think the organization, I think the Texans, if they really wanted Stroud off the board at 1, they could have beaten the living crap out of that S2 stuff and been like, no, that's absolute, like, that's just garbage. He's this great player and all this stuff. And I don't think they did that. And I think part of the reason they did that is because they knew they wanted him to be there for them at 2. It's a conspiracy theory on my part, but I always wondered.
About to say, were they the source of those leaks? I mean, because that's always the theory. Always the theory is that the teams that are putting out the negative information because they want a player to fall. So,
well, I mean, look, I'm not going to say they're the source of the leaks. I can just tell you.
But you're not going to not say that they're.
Because I don't, you know, all I know is, in my experience, I don't feel like they went hard in the paint to convince me that Stroud was the best quarterback in the draft. And then they drafted him, and it wasn't until they drafted him that I looked back and went, huh. Like, maybe there's a reason why they weren't trying to convince me that he was the best quarterback in the draft.
So your gut tells you. So your gut tells you, had they not won their last game last year and they got the number 1 pick, A, they keep it, and B, your gut tells you that they take CJ Stroud.
I think they wanted Stroud. That's how, in retrospect, thinking of the conversations that I had with them, and I didn't realize at the time, it wasn't until after they had taken him, and it kind of refocused in my mind, like, what were those conversations like? And you know, you go back and you read through old texts and things, and you're like, okay, this feels a little bit different than I expected. Yeah, and you just don't. Yeah. And I do think that's real, by the way, what you say about teams do, if they have a preferred player, particularly if it's a quarterback, and it's an either or. You know, if you're sitting there and it's 2 quarterbacks at the top of the board, and you know you want one, you're gonna try to get that player into your hands. You're not just gonna sit idly by and be like, oh well, you know, our chosen guy might not be there.
Well, easily the biggest loser in this this whole post-draft process is the S2 test. Probably has zero credibility at this point moving forward. Anytime somebody brings it up, they'll be like, I don't know about that. Look at CJ Stroud. Okay, but now conversely, Carolina, who I just saw on Thursday night, I just had to endure Carolina, Chicago, and I want to talk to you about the Bears as well. But the Panthers still maintain that A, they were unanimous in selecting Bryce Young number 1. B, they have no regrets, not even one letter, no regrets about CJ Stroud, about taking Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. And what's also interesting is, and I'm sure you've heard some of the same things, is they look at Bryce Young's struggles as less about Bryce and more about what they don't have around Bryce, both in terms of his protection, his receiving core, running game, consistency in terms of offensive philosophy and play calling. But also they believe that if you reverse these 2 players, which is interesting considering what we were talking about the Texans going into the season and the weapons that CJ Stroud didn't have and how beat up his offensive line was. But in this moment, and I'm sure he's getting help from his teammates now. We probably underestimated them and underrated them. But the Panthers believe that if you were to switch these 2 players, that Bryce Young would be thriving. Maybe not at a record-setting pace, but that he would be doing well if he had the type of support that CJ Stroud is getting now. You could say that's convenient if you want. Just telling you how the Panthers think, and I'm sure you've heard the same thing. I guess what I wonder, just in your opinion, Charles, it's only a half a season in, and Bryce Young may still, as the Panthers believe, be the best quarterback in the long run. But are we already past the point, given what CJ Stroud has done and how he's looked so far, are we already past the point of the benefit of the doubt? In other words, like, is it pretty clear that Bryce Young ain't the best guy at his lot? Because even Anthony Richardson, we saw enough from him in a flash to put him ahead of Bryce Young even though he got hurt, he hadn't stayed on the field. We talk about Bryce Young's durability. Anthony Richardson's the one that didn't stay on the field. But are we already past the part of comparison, just going back to that? Like, it just feels like, yeah, that ship has sailed. Like, Stroud was the guy. Doesn't mean Bryce can't be good, but Stroud was the guy in this class.
Yeah, let's relax a little bit. Okay. It's half a season. Okay. And I say that because what did we think of Mac Jones coming out of his rookie year? Right? Like, oh, the Patriots solved it. They got their guy. He might be the best quarterback in this draft. All these different things. And then it's steadily fallen apart around him and fallen off. And I think that, Stroud's the rookie of the year. I don't think there's any question about that. He's probably going to be a Pro Bowler. Maybe get some All-Pro and MVP votes.
Or MTV. They still got MTV awards, votes, right?
Yeah. I mean, let's give it some time. Let's see what it looks like let's see what it looks like when Bryce Young has a team built out around him. How many touchdowns did Baker Mayfield throw as a rookie? 27? Wasn't it like 27? It was like it was a lot. He threw a lot of touchdowns as a rookie. How many interceptions did Peyton Manning throw?
Probably would have had Baker Mayfield as a rookie ahead of Josh Allen or even Lamar Jackson for that matter, right?
Absolutely. I don't think. I think maybe not Lamar. I mean, Lamar obviously came out of the box looking pretty good too. But at least in the
his second year, remember Lamar his first year, he came in late in the year. Remember, and he wasn't throwing it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, his second year is when Lamar took off. Yeah,
it's funny because I remember it being like instantaneous. But you're right, Flacco. I forgot there was the Flacco debate early on. But I mean, Baker probably in that class. But again, look at Peyton Manning. He threw 30 plus interceptions somewhere around there his rookie year, and
high 20s.
It was, I mean, it was up there. I think he still holds the rookie record for interceptions as a rookie. To me, you just let the Panthers figure it out. I do think when we compare the skill set, the skill position players around each, the Texans did a really good thing to go and get Dalton Schultz. He's been a very good tight end for them. I think listening to CJ Stroud, who said draft Tank Dell, was a really smart thing to, and everyone else is out there sitting there going, I mean, I remember watching the guy at the Senior Bowl. He destroyed guys. He put everybody in a blender. It was crazy. But then when you talk to teams about him, they're like, is he going to play like 165? Like you can't. Can you have a player come out and thrive at the wide receiver position who's going to be, around the 160 mark? And then look at what he's done. I mean, he's been exquisite for them. So you have to ask yourself, is that a function of how good CJ Stroud is? Is that why these guys around him are balling out? Maybe, and if Bryce Young's in there, maybe these guys don't look as good. But I would tend to agree that if you look at the skill position players on both sides, I would lean into what Stroud has around him. He's got a better running back. I think he's got, Nico Collins is healthy. I think he's got better wide receivers. And
offensive line has played better.
Offensive line, despite being banged up, has played better. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And whereas like the Panthers, I mean, it's everything about the two situations is very dissimilar. The Panthers line is not performed at all well. The skill positions are devoid of talent, or at least the top shelf talent they'd like. And they
you got a Sean McVay disciple. You got a Sean McVay disciple calling a Frank Reich offense. It's just he's not being set up to succeed. Don't get me wrong. I'm in no way declaring that Bryce Young is a bust after a half a season. What I'm talking about, it just speaks more to. I'm wondering, is Stroud just this good? Like I'm struggling to remember, and I'm prisoner of the moment, struggling to remember a better rookie season, a rookie quarterback who looked more like a veteran this quickly. Because even if you want to go statistically, and I'm barely old enough to remember Marino. I know Marino looked like he belonged, in '83, his first year. But if you want to go statistically, for a while, it was Ben Roethlisberger was the gold standard for rookie quarterbacks. But they won a lot of games with a running game and a defense. And, hey, Ben, don't lose it, make plays here and there. I know Matt Ryan and the aforementioned Joe Flacco both had very successful rookie years. But I don't remember a guy being him right out the gate the way CJ Stroud has been, like I said, Bryce Young could still be very good. But it feels, you know what it feels like to me? And tell me if you agree with this. It feels like Bryce Young is more of the type of guy that is, if things are great around him, can bring out the best in everybody with his skill set, whereas CJ Stroud seems to have that ability to elevate the players around him. With all due respect to both Bryce Young and to the supporting cast of CJ Stroud. You think that's a fair comparison? Or a fair way to put it, or maybe too soon to say that?
Personnel, people call it the trucks versus trailers, is like CJ Stroud's the truck. He pulls you along.
Yeah.
And Bryce Young maybe's the trailer where, he's functional and he's good, but he also has to be pulled by the surrounding pieces around him. So, I mean, I would say in the early going, it looks like Stroud is definitely, I don't remember a rookie season ever like this. And I remember the Roethlisberger season in particular because it was so stunning, the amount of success they were having and how good he looked. Yeah. But as you said, it was functionally a run-dominated offense. It was a defense, it was a defensive team. There are all these things that are very dissimilar to what the Texans are. The Texans are a passing team. And not only, I mean, they are a big-time passing team.
Downfield, yes.
No, it's not. It's not. There's a lot of air yards. There's a lot of like 10-plus air yards. Here's what his throws are. And it's like, when you look at it, you're like, geez, half of his attempts are like 10-plus throws, in terms of like air yards, which is very different than a lot of offenses run in the NFL now. I mean, I would say in the early going, absolutely, Stroud looks like a guy who's able to carry a franchise, put him on, and he is doing that in some respects. But I also want to be, I want to be fair to DeMeco Ryans. I want to be fair to the Texans' defense, which has been really good. Yeah. I mean, the aggression, the tenacity, they're
look
just
like 49ers-esque. They're flying around.
They look faster. Yeah, they look faster. Yeah. Their mentality looks different. It is a seismic shift in almost everything that they have put on the football field, both offensively and defensively. But yeah, I mean, I would say that Stroud so far, and again, we're talking about half a season, probably represents that Marino type of player where you watch him and you go, uh-oh, like this is like he looks like he's in year 5, not in year 1. He looks comfortable. When you listen to him, he had this moment too where he was reciting. It was like 2 games ago. He was reciting the last drive, their last game-winning drive, and off the top of his head, he was like, "And then this happened, and this guy did this, and this guy did that." And when you overlaid it with the tape, you're like, he literally just described every single play and exactly how it unfolded, including other guys who weren't necessarily catching the football, how the whole thing unfolded. And I had somebody text me in the league. They texted me the clip. And they're like, check this out. They're like, and then they just started banging on the S2. They're like, I guess the S2 doesn't matter so much when you got a guy who can think like this. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing what he's doing. But I think it's just because I've covered the league so long that I always try to be a little cautious about how, because I remember the Mac Jones thing, watching him as a rookie, and I'm like, I can't believe this. Like they freaking replaced Brady with a guy who might not be Brady, but he looks like he's going to be a great quarterback, and then that just completely went off a cliff. And
I want to talk to you about Mac as well, that very cliff. But I mean, you know what Bryce Young is? A rookie quarterback. Just like most rookie quarterbacks who get drafted into bad situations, especially when a team gave up what the Panthers gave up in order to get Bryce Young, and they struggle out of the gate for their first season or 2. Some of them don't even start right away. CJ Stroud, he's the outlier. Yes, we used to. Yes.
We used to accept that. And like now it's like it's crazy because even like Josh Allen, like if you go back, Josh Allen's first year was objectively bad. Like it was bad. Year 2 was still pretty not great. Yeah. He took a step, but still in year 2, you're like, ugh. And then year 3 blossoms and really becomes, what he is now. And but yeah, it's just there's no patience anymore for, I think, coaching staffs. I think especially quarterbacks. It's just,
patience. Well, that's the question I want to ask you. I think if there were a competition for least amount of patience in the NFL, David Tepper would be right up there. How patient do you think he is or is going to be with this group, and Frank Reich in particular, if they don't manage to, especially with CJ Stroud applying pressure from Houston, if you will? It's like, hey, why is my guy not doing this? Like, what are we doing on offense where we could barely score points?
It's tough that they have a comparison, right? I mean, that weighs on Bryce Young. It weighs on the coaching staff there, that you had two guys available to you. You chose this one, and now you're watching the other one ball out, and you're constantly going to have these two guys compared against each other because of the draft positioning. But I would say that when you look at the organization, the one thing, remember, like, Scott Fitterer is still there. So the general manager. So, Tepper makes all these moves. He ultimately ends up, makes a coaching change. Scott Fitterer, the general manager, stays in-house. And really what you hear in the building is, okay, we got 3 years to figure out the clock is now running. It's going to be 3 years. Get the quarterback situation resolved, and not like resolve it in year 3, have it up and running on a high level in year 3. Well, when you talk to people inside the building, and some that aren't no longer inside the building in Carolina, what they'll tell you is Tepper, they call it, like, I had a guy call it Tepper time, cut it in half. He's like, whatever he says, you can take that and cut it in half. So if he's told you got 3 years, you got a year and a half to get this figured out and up and running. Right. So I think the staff is okay. But if Tepper is going to blame someone, I mean, who's left really to blame that's not himself? I would guess he would look at the general manager and say, well, geez, you're still the guy who's here from the past regime, and which I don't agree with.
That was more Matt Rule. Yeah, like wasn't Rule picking the players, and didn't he kind of was one of the plays?
I would not put, like, Scott Fitterer, like, this is especially when like some deals that they didn't make that they should have made, and I think that Fitterer was behind, like he wanted to make these deals, and ultimately it was Tepper who squashed it. I mean, they had Matt Stafford at one point. I think they could have gotten him. They had a deal, pretty much worked out at the Senior Bowl, and then Tepper got nervous about Stafford's back, and that blew that up. I think Tepper pushed in way too hard early on Deshaun Watson, and to be completely honest with you, I think everybody else in the building is like, I don't know if we want to give up this kind of draft assets and all this stuff that's going on. And ultimately, I think kind of worked out for him. I mean, maybe the situation is different for Deshaun in Carolina or whatever. I think the staff's going to be fine for 2024, right? You're going to get another year out of this. And frankly, if Tepper were to pull the plug, then at that point, it's clear he's just a bad owner at that point. You can't constantly keep churning the decision makers in your building and expect it to be a good thing, both for your organization and especially your quarterback. Leave some continuity in place, let the kid grow, add some pieces, address some other problems, and see where this takes you in 2024.
No, I agree. I would just say, though, I just wonder. It's like defensively, they've been very competitive. Special teams, solid. But it's just like offensively, if you hire a head coach and his specialty is offense, and your problem is offense, and you've gone back and forth in terms of systems and play calling and calling. It's like, I think to me, if anybody should be nervous in Carolina right now, given like, hey, the personnel plan is going to take 2 or 3 years, again, given what they had to give up to get Bryce Young, I think if anybody should be nervous, even in his first year, it might be the head coach, just because the offense, his side of the ball, has been so bad. Hey, thanks so much for kicking it with your main man, Michael Smith. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, but also subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Rate it, review it, tell your friends about it. Oh, and be sure to follow me on social media.